and roll.
Alrighty. So, we were discussing before we hit record, and I was like, "Hey, we need to start because we're going to say some stuff that needs to be captured." So, anyway, so we're going to jump
Bill
in.
Bill was Bill was waxing eloquent, and we want to make
Yeah.
sure we got it all.
No, 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 no. Let's not think that. Hopefully, I've got the audio figured out this time. We'll find out. Um, anyway, so today, this discussion, this conversation, is going to be centered around, as Jason says, we finally pulled the Bible out. We're going to be centered around um, something that is vitally important to this process, which is um, being in heavy debt to the world. Uh, and we're really going to be talking about not only the debt itself, but about transferring the debt and how vital it is. Um, so it's going to be in Romans. In Romans, there's just a set. I'm going to set the foundation landscape, and then we'll meander around inside of it. Um, but in in Romans, there's Paul lists 5 debts that every believer has. I can give you the text, and then if you want to be diligent and be a good disciple, you can go back and look them up. Um, but it's based off the Greek word "aphel," which means to be in debt. Um, there's I'll butcher the pronunciation, so I won't even try it. But the first one is in Romans 8:12. Then Romans 13:8, there's one. Romans 15:1 through 2, there's one. Romans 15:25 through 27. And the one we're really going to settle in on is Romans 1:14 through 16. So,
Go back through them again, Bill.
short Romans 8:12,
Hmm.
Romans 13:8, 15:1 through 2, and then 15:25 through 27. And where we're going to be is 1:14 through 16. And I'm reading out of the NASB, um, and it says a little bit different. It says, "I am under obligation." What's the King James say?
I am debtor.
Debtor. I'm debtor. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
So
apopletes.
yeah, aphiletes. I'm under obligation both to Greeks and to barbarians, both the wise and the foolish. Um, For thus my for I'm sorry, thus my part, I am eager to preach the gospel to you also who are in Rome, for I am not ashamed of the gospel, for it is the power of God for salvation to everyone who believes, to the Jew first, and also to the Greek. So I know we're jumping right in the middle. We didn't really put it in context, but really, what he's talking about here is, when he says to the Greeks, to the barbarians, to the wise, to the fool, it's basically everybody. There's nobody that's not in this. There's nobody that I'm not obligated to. So, um, oh God, there's so much I
Well,
want to say.
he kind of precursors what he's getting ready to say by
Yeah,
saying in verse 13, "Hey, I've been wanting to come to you guys for a long time."
yeah,
Like Paul's writing to the Romans and ain't never been there at this point
yeah,
because he's trying to go, and every time he tries to go, he gets hindered. And so he understands his debt is not just, "Hey, I'm gonna preach it here." I literally have to bring it to you. Like
right.
I'm under obligation to bring the gospel, and that just doesn't mean just a prayer and be in heaven kind of thing. It's a bigger idea than that.
Yeah. So, man, we're really, I think I'm starting to really realize just now that we know what we're talking about, but we're really cutting into something that probably most believers have never heard in their life. I would
Yeah.
venture to say, and just for those that are listening, I'll just explain it. Basically, is that because you own Christ, you owe Christ to the world.
Amen.
Um, Paul looked at this, and I think Jason, you said it before we started recording. Some people would say, "Hey, that's Paul. That's for Paul, and that's how Paul felt." But that doesn't apply to me.
He was an apostle, so of course he has that debt. Yeah,
Right.
that's
Well,
what people say.
right. But we may not be the official office of apostle, but we have the same. We have the same mandate. We have the same scope. I mean, everything that they were responsible for, we're responsible for. I wouldn't, and you may think that's unfair, but it's not unfair. I don't think Jesus would think it was unfair. But
Well, you guys have done a really good job over the last several podcasts y'all done talking about what it means to be a disciple maker, and that's the heart of our assignment,
yeah,
the Great Commission. And this is just an element of that assignment. It can't be minimized to just your corner of the world or just your community or just your church. You're on our obligation to every person on earth, like you said, because you own Christ or because Christ lives in you.
right,
You're obligated to take him to every part of the world, every corner,
right.
which just seems impossible. Which goes back to the need for the Spirit of God to work.
Well, it is impossible. It really is impossible, and it really is. It really puts you in a place of needing the power of God to interact with you, or you're sunk. There's no way to make it. There's no way to do it unless God gets involved. Now, um, whenever I was listening, I used to listen to when I was. Um, I used to drive all the time for my job, and I would listen to, teachings and my discipler, he would send information on a regular basis, and so I'm listening to him talk about this, and I'm driving down the road. I can still remember. It's like one of those monumental times in your life when that changes the course of your, of history for you. And I remember where I was driving. I was driving right by this one exit on the interstate, and I heard this idea of I owe light to the world, and it was just like the Holy Spirit just completely tackled me, and and was like put the debt on me, and made me really feel it. And my first immediate reaction to that was, crap. The only way to get this done is to build disciples for multiplication. And then I realized that because I'd been hearing that, been hearing that, and then finally it connected. And my first immediate reaction was to call up the guy that was giving me the information and say, "You got to help me," because I realized how deficient I was immediately. Um, and that started the journey. And I've been a pit bull with a bone ever since. Um,
Yeah.
but I don't know about.
Well, yeah, I know a lot of people that I meet with. You start talking about this debt, and the first thing they want to do is minimize it because it's crushing. It's absurd. Like I come to you and say, you're late on your library book, so your late payment is $8 million. It's just like it's unfathomable. And I think the problem is we hear that obligation, and we go, that's an impossibility, and so we sidestep it. We get
Mhm.
out from under the weight of it and dismiss it. And when we do that, then how we do ministry or how we do our walk is you can choose then. You can choose to do it however you want to, but if you have a debt that's like bone crushing, there's really only one way to start paying it. So like for me, if I owed $100 to somebody, I mean I could probably come up with it pretty easy. But if a guy shows up on my doorstep and I owe him 5 million, I'm pretty limited on the ways I can get
Right,
that done.
right,
There's very few ways that I can do that, and it's kind of that feeling. So God kind of paints you into a corner to say, hey, if you want to take on this debt, if you want to agree with me and say yes, I'm obligated to everyone, then there's really only one way to start paying on it, and
right.
it forces you down the road of the strategy that Jesus gave us.
Yeah.
And if you don't do the debt, then you can kind of you can do gospel outreach or whatever, however you want to, because who cares?
Whatever gives you
You
the
know,
warm fuzzies.
it's only $100. You can pay it any way you want.
Yeah. So what about? So I'm gonna string some pearls together real quick.
Okay.
So, you're talking, and I'm actually being a good disciple, I have my pen and my notes today. So going all the way back to the Hebrew word ruach,
Mm-hmm.
and the introduction all the way back in Genesis 1 with this breath of God, the very life that God breathes, the ruach that's hovering over the nothingness in Genesis 1, 1, 2, 1, 3. And then we kind of see um, we see this mandate God puts on man to reproduce God's image, to um, not just reproduce but replenish the world with God's image, as man is called to reproduce. And then that the carrying on throughout. I'm just thinking about the movement of God, as his intention was for all of us to be debtors from the beginning. It's not like Jesus brought in a new revelation. I think he just picked up what God had set out in the beginning, and Jesus handled it perfectly. And Jesus demonstrated and gave it away perfectly. And I'm thinking about Abraham, and I'm looking at that. You're talking about 105 million, and it's like he can't even bear a son for God to begin the process of multiplying his descendants to the sands of the sea.
Yeah.
And what did he feel? I mean, what was? I mean, that's a debt, especially when you don't even have the ability to do it because your wife's barren. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm just, like I said, the stringing the pearls together. And for me, this is like something that showed up in the beginning, and it kept reproducing itself, and usually just one person all throughout the story up to Jesus. And then, of course, Jesus comes in, and the ultimate debt was his own life, right? Like, to die for the sins of the world. But I don't know, man. I'm just, like I said, I'm stringing that in my head while
Mm-hmm.
y'all were talking, and I just said it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I can remember, Bill was talking about feeling that debt, going down the interstate, listening to a message. And I can remember where I was at. I was at we were visiting a church, and the man who was speaking was talking about, he wasn't even talking about the debt, but he was talking about just basically having a life that's, is from Galatians, I'm crucified with Christ, nevertheless, I live, that whole thing. And he was talking about the idea of letting Christ live through you. And my understanding of the debt right then was, I'm obligated, um, to an extent, to share Christ with everybody I meet. And that was where I was at. But then I realized, wait a minute, I've got not only to just present a gospel, I've got to present a life, I got to present a person, I got to present the whole package to everyone. And I'm like, that there's no way, I can't even convince the guy standing in front of me to come to Christ. Like, I have no, like, the obligation and the ability were nowhere near each other.
Right.
It's like saying, hey, can you pay $5 million? I don't know how to make $5 million. I know how to make $100 or $200. That's simple. And so the overwhelming feeling of that debt and my inability to even begin to pay a penny toward it was what crushed me. And I think Abraham was that way. He's like, look, you're calling me to be a father of nations, and I can't even bear a son. Like, the impossibility of this is just overwhelming.
Right.
And I think God had to show him a picture to say, look, I'm going to do this.
Right.
You may not see the complete fulfillment of it, but I'm going to begin with you. And that's what we got to say. Look, I may not see the whole world come to Christ, but if I'm willing to take the step, he will start the process through me.
Right.
And it'll
And
continue to
accomplish it.
perpetuate after I'm gone.
Right. And whenever you talk about Abraham, what was his immediate reaction to hearing that? Was to do it in his own strength, right?
Yeah.
And do it in yourself, and it's always a disaster, and you're going to produce something that's really not just bad but destructive.
Oh, yeah.
And
And
that goes back to Romans 8:12, that one text where don't be indebted to the flesh,
yes,
but be indebted to, of course, the spirit. And that's that idea of that's what comes against the strategy of Christ. Is there's always something that's going to parallel, but the parallel the enemy always seems to bring in, or even our flesh is battling with. The parallel is always literally counterproductive to the mission, and yeah, the flesh is. But that again, does that not make the statement of it's baked into the cake?
Yeah.
Failure's baked into the cake.
Right.
That even with this strategy that is of the heart of God, that wants the whole world to know.
Right.
Even with that strategy that's so precise and so full of love and grace, we can screw it up.
Sure.
Like we can spend it on ourselves, or make it something that's not of us.
Well, what happens with, when you realize this, part of what God's got to do is get your flesh out of the way, so that the spirit. So the best thing to do, like if somebody says, "Well, I'm going to do this in my own chutzpah or my own," have at it, buddy, and you're going to hit the
Been
wall
there, done it.
hard. You're going to hit the wall hard, but that's good
Oh,
though.
you got to go through that.
Yeah.
You got to go through that.
You need to hit that guy really hard, and that way he don't want to hit him so hard he don't want to get back up.
Yeah.
And that way the spirit can can take control. And what we're really talking about is this, and we've kind of danced around it and kind of said it, and is that when Jesus showed up on the scene, he was not counting on anybody else to do the job that the Father had sent him to do. He was going to impart that to others, but he wasn't looking around saying, well, if I don't make it, if I don't do this, then somebody else is going to do it. Then somebody else is going to pick up right behind me. Jesus never thought that thought. He knew that if he didn't pick it up, there was no hope for mankind. Mankind was screwed, royally screwed. If he, like in the garden and everything else, he knows everything's weighing down on him if he does not step up and do this. All right? Well, that attitude is what I'm talking about. That's the debt. When I say the debt to the world, that's the debt. Is to look and think and react and be. If I don't do this, and I know a lot of people say, "Well, you sound real proud of yourself, or you're arrogant." No, it's not. That's not what I'm trying to get to. It's like you have to think in those terms, because if you don't, then you're going to say, well, that organization will do it, or that person will do it, or somebody else will do it if I don't make it. No, you've got to be that. I think that gives you the gas in the tank.
Yeah. What's that also that common thing they say when you come up on the scene of an accident and somebody needs help, you don't just point to the crowd and say somebody call 911. You actually point to an individual and say you go call 911, because everybody, if you just say somebody call, everybody assumes somebody else is doing it,
Right.
and nobody does it.
Right.
So it's like I've got to take personal responsibility for this. No matter what you do or what you do, I've chosen to say yes. I'm in debt. I'm going to start paying toward it.
Right.
So.
And that may sound unfair, and if it sounds unfair, and you want to sidestep it, go ahead. But just, it's not safe. It's not safe. Yeah. I mean, like
So
doesn't it eliminate what God wants to give you to make it happen?
Oh wow!
Like in other words, like He's giving you a treasure to pursue this debt, to pay on it, and if you're not willing to pay on it, then you don't have access to that treasure.
Yeah. So it's the key.
Strategy to make this done. Yeah, really.
The keys of the kingdom. And then I was going to say, Bill, like that question you've told me to ask several of my guys before. What would you do if every disciple maker that you knew right now was gone? Like, what would you do?
Mm.
Would you assume the responsibility of the debt of training a man to reproduce that debt, to reproduce that light, to reproduce that strategy? I mean, what? And that's a great question that holds an accountability to it, to a point, right?
Yeah, yeah.
You ask it better. Ask that. You ask it better.
No, you asked it fine.
I've heard it a lot over the last couple of years.
Well, I'd probably say it about 15 million different ways, but
Yeah.
It's just, and the reason I asked this question, even the reason why we're talking about it today was, we've been in this process for a long time. Oh, well, depends on your definition of long time, but we've been in it a few days. And there was one point and Jason, you know what I'm talking about. You were there. There was one point. Uh, Herb was at my house, and we had a bunch of people there, and Herb was talking about he was, being very kind to me, and he used the word tenacious, and and I was explaining why I was so tenacious, and that was I started talking about the debt that I felt, and I looked around the room, and everybody, and it was probably half the people looked at me like I was
Yeah,
talking another
probably larger
language.
than half. Yeah, probably larger than half.
And I was being kind to myself. So I was looking, I was like, uh,
Just it was just part of it was just a flaw that we didn't recognize.
yeah, yeah. And I realized at that moment I had not transferred the debt that I felt to others. And I did. It's not that I didn't do it out of laziness. I just didn't realize it was a component that it was so natural to me. I just thought everybody had it.
And I mean, I know you can teach that concept like in scripture,
Mm-hmm.
we have an obligation to do that to be sure. And I think that's what you mean is
Yeah.
when you transfer is showing in scripture that we are obligated and
Right.
responsible. But to hand that off to somebody is like a work of the spirit
Oh yeah,
because you
definitely.
can easily hear it and go, that's crazy. You know what I mean? Because I don't think you could have imparted that to me in the way that God did. Now
Right.
you talked about the idea, but it really took the Spirit of God to let you feel it and let it become real to you and me. And I think
Yeah.
I mean, I look back on it and going, it was a watershed moment for me. I was realizing this is a lifelong thing and I'm never going to quit. And I don't know how to hand that off to somebody. You can try through information transfer.
Well, you
But
bring up a great point. That's a great point, and I'm glad you said it because I don't want to give the impression that this is something you can just put on somebody, um,
right.
because and what that and if you try to put it on somebody, then it's definitely going to be flesh. It's going to be legalism. It's going to be, you're putting something on somebody that they don't want, and
Yeah.
that's
We'll talk about how to do that. Talk about how to do that because there's always going to be an element of when you present a truth to somebody
mhm,
who's has an open and willing heart to obey it.
yeah,
There's always going to be an element of I'm going to run in this in my flesh
mhm,
because I don't know any other way to run with it for a while. You know what I'm saying?
mhm,
So like talk about how to have that balance of relaying an information that moves somebody versus relaying information that makes someone feel arm twisted.
right.
Because I think you do a really good job of that. Like you balance that line really well.
Okay. Well, I hope I can match it. uh, but like, I'm thinking about the individuals after. I'm thinking about the individuals I interact with after realizing that I had left a component out. And so when I first would start with somebody, I'm always constantly putting the world in front of them. I'm always constantly referring to where this is supposed to reach, where this is supposed to go, where this is supposed to wash up on what shore, right? And when you're constant, so I found that if you're constantly saying this, yes, we're learning about purity, or hey, we're learning about whatever the normal churchy things we talk about. You know, these things have to wash up on distant shores that you never will reach, that you'll never personally go to. Is what I mean. You'll reach them, but it's not you're never gonna show up yourself. You're gonna send somebody in your place or somebody in a downline. Um, and so I'm constantly saying things like that, but I'm coupling it with these are impossible things in the flesh. These are things that you cannot do in and of yourself. This is why being Christ-like is so important. This is why, being in the Spirit is so important, because the Spirit has to lead you. The Spirit has to guide you. The Spirit has to endorse it, right? If the Spirit doesn't endorse it, you're sunk. And showing the I am with you, why that is so important in the Great Commission, because you need to transfer these on a spiritual level, which is impossible in your flesh. which goes back to you can't make people hear, you can't make people see. You can twist their arm, you can beat them over the head. It's just never going to happen. And back and also what we're trying to say is people hear gospel and they hear heaven and hell. That's important, but the gospel's bigger than that. It's bigger than heaven and hell. The part of the gospel is this debt, this process of, and what this does, and I kind of put a carrot in front of people is, you're going to become in attitude and actions and personality the very thing that Jesus was in Christ being the office of Messiah, Christos. You're not the Messiah, but you're going to assume that position. And so I don't know if I'm saying everything that you were referring to. You can add in whatever I'm missing, but
Well, I think what you said, at the beginning was kind of the key. Was you've just got to put it before them repeatedly,
yes.
and putting it in front of somebody is basically modeling something,
Mm-hmm.
and repeating something, and showing people something. Like, cause when I sit down with somebody early on in the process, I mean, like the first time I sit down with them, and they've asked to meet, I usually say, look, I appreciate you coming, and I appreciate you having a hunger to want to learn. I said, but the minute you sat in that chair, it ceased to be about you, and it started to be about the next man who's coming through you. And so I want you to understand everything I'm giving you is not for you; it's through you.
Yeah.
Somebody else at the ends of the earth. And so I start that from the get go, so they understand. Hey, this ain't just a Bible study. This ain't just me getting smarter. This ain't just me learning more Bible knowledge. This is a lifestyle that's going to turn you inside out.
And you and part of that modeling, like you talk about, is going out from your location, whether that be domestic, your country, whether that be another country, but there's got to be some action to it where you're going out trying to find those people that you can build that will reproduce this in other people.
I mean, Jesus followed that too. I mean, he walked everywhere, took his guys everywhere, showed them all different types of societies and people groups. So,
I think early on, like for me, with position, like pastor, most people will think, well, he's going to make me better. He's going to make me a better person, right? With his teaching, and it so easily can go from centered on going after something a lot bigger than you, which is, of course, the world, and it can very quickly turn back to building somebody up and it not going beyond them. Like it's just self-help stuff. And then I struggled with that early on, to where, yeah, I mean, I was a disciple maker, but the guys that I was pouring into were maybe being able to overcome this a little better. And there's parts of that. You said that early on, Bill. Like, it's like, yeah, I mean, we got to talk about purity. We've got to talk about the issues that you're dealing with, because we've got to kind of get you free from you so you can be free for somebody else. And that's a big part of it. But if you don't have anywhere for them to go when they do get set free from themselves, then naturally, in our human flesh, we're going to come right back to us.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And now I've had two guys over the last couple of years that's come my way that I've had to straighten out some of the stuff in their lives,
Mm-hmm.
but at the same time, I am so much more intentional about this is not for you, and putting this debt in front of them, to where I wasn't doing that for the first 15 years of this, maybe even longer. And I can't tell you why I didn't. And it could have been because I didn't see it until, and when I did see it, you know this, Bill, I know you know this too, Jason. When I did see that I had screwed this thing up like you, I didn't see it in me. I saw it in the guys that I was discipling.
Yeah.
And when I realized they didn't share that debt, that understanding like I did, it was like, I missed that one.
Mm,
That's a big one. I flipping did not transfer that.
yeah.
What's the easiest way you knew that though? Because I'm thinking in my mind, like you say that. What? How did it dawn on you that they didn't pick it up?
Because
Like what
they
they weren't
they weren't
moving.
they
Yeah,
weren't moving.
yeah,
They weren't moving.
yeah.
And I had moved some in that. Now I wasn't traveling regularly, and I probably could have had some opportunities too, and I didn't. But I was not even promoting movement either. I can't blame it all on them, because I mean it comes back to the disciple
Right.
maker, and it does,
Mhm.
and that was a hard pill for me to swallow, and it
Which goes
struck.
back, yeah, which goes back to you've got to model it, not
Yeah.
just say it. They've got to
Yeah,
see it living out in you. Yeah,
But
yeah,
you can do everything correctly. You can do everything to try to transfer this, and people, if people are centered on themselves and selfish, and I'm not saying that, and I'm not like trying to beat up anybody. It's just where they are,
yeah. Oh yeah,
because there's guys that have been around me that will not, they do not feel the debt because
right.
they don't want to, they
Yeah,
don't, that's too heavy for me, or well, oh, I can't say it like you do, I can't do what you do. Well, why
yeah,
not? Who cares? you know I don't, I'm not necessarily asking you to say it exactly like I do. I'm asking you to say it better than I do,
yeah,
to do better than I, or even if you say it worse than I, whether you say it good or whether you say it bad is irrelevant. It's about the Spirit of God endorsing it, hitting it, revealing it.
yeah.
The angels singing in the background. I see. You know.
I mean,
Um,
after 10 years of this, that don't automatically happen. The angels start following you around and
yeah,
singing behind
exactly.
you.
It's like that.
That'll make it a whole lot easier.
It's like that Geico commercial where you hear the people singing in the background, and then all of a sudden you look over, there's a choir, and he goes, "Yeah, we let them practice here." You know.
Well, it reminds me and Derek had this conversation the other day about this very thing. When Jesus is talking about the parables of the soul, we call it parable of the sower, but it's really a parable of the souls. And we make it about the person sowing or about the seed. Well, that parable eliminates that. It totally eliminates. Like, it's not about the sower. It's not about the seed. Those things are legitimately not even the focus. And so we don't take the ownership of, oh, it's about the preacher or the teacher, or oh, it's about what we're saying. No, the fact is the reproduction comes if the soul is good.
Yeah.
If you're using truth and you're speaking truth, it's automatic if the soul is good. So you got people who just aren't willing to hear. They just aren't willing to follow. They just
Right.
aren't willing to go, and for whatever reason, and we can't decide why that is, and we can't change it really necessarily. So we just got to assume, okay, Lord, for whatever reason, they're not willing to move or willing to go.
And I know I'm also trying to put myself in the position of somebody who's listening to this that has never heard what we call the basic strategy, that doesn't understand, you're filtering everything that we're saying through evangelism, through the institutional model, and you're trying to filter that everything we're saying, that you got to be really, you got to reach out and stretch yourself and understand we're not talking about, um, help me out.
Witnessing,
Yeah,
Yeah,
witnessing more or being better
yeah,
at it,
yeah.
or yeah,
Handing out more tracks. I mean,
right,
do that. Great,
sure,
fine.
sure,
I mean, I was a, was, I'm not so much anymore, but there was a time, man, I was a track fiend. I did all kinds of stuff, and God did some really amazing stuff with that. But God was teaching me something about that. He let me go full blast into that to help me realize you're not going to muscle your way through this.
I
You
mean,
know,
there's definitely an element of engagement with people
yeah,
that has to happen
right,
continually in your life. Otherwise, you got no place to sow.
right,
So engagement is key. But yeah, a system of engagement that's better than another one's really not going to get it done.
yeah,
So
when it goes back to the bottle, it goes back to the illustration, because I'm thinking as a quote unquote pastor, church leader, somebody that's listening that has that mindset would be thinking, well, as if I can just get in front of 15,000 people, if I can just get in front of this large group of people and say the gospel, that's gonna, like the Billy Graham mentality.
Yeah.
That's gonna make that's gonna make a dent in the world. And it's like, yeah, but what are they getting from you? What are they hearing? Again, it's the that Coke bottle and the BBs, and the idea of disciple making is the intentional one-on-one strategy to change one man, not to just get 15,000 to hear something that they really don't receive a lot. This
Yeah.
doesn't go down and stick so that it can come back up and produce fruit.
Right.
And that's the problem with the crowd. That's why I rail on a crowd, because I've seen the futility of it, because I've tried it that way.
Yeah.
Yeah, I kind of chuckle when
I
you're
have the right to try.
when you're I'm chuckling when you're talking because I'm thinking to myself, okay, a pastor who has a church of 25 and he wants a church of 200. What's happening with the 25? What do you want to? Why do you want to add 175 more that don't listen to you?
That's right. Bingo.
Ouch.
There's the
Why don't
angel.
you, why don't you
There's
focus on the
did you
ones
hear
in
the
front of
angel?
you and teach him how to hear, teach him how to reproduce, and then maybe
That
go.
was the angel singing, Dillingham, right there.
Yeah.
Well, I'm amazed that we don't ever assess where we're at, and we just
We
want to
just took a dump on.
increase the number. We're not doing it right, but just increase the number. That'll make it better.
Yeah, we ended up getting our institutional in. Now we're good. We don't have to.
Well, I'm not even worried about so much of that. It's just
No.
that's
Yeah,
just ministry mindset. Bigger is
Yeah.
better, and it's
Yeah.
not.
Well,
It's just not.
you know, I was talking to Jason last night. We were trying to work out some of this technical stuff, and I mentioned to him that I had, again, these things come in my feeds on social media, and I'm like, where is this stuff coming from? But but there was a
I'm going to them size, Bill.
yeah, exactly. But it was this pastor talking to this guy who was a pastor type, who was like apparently this great speaker and had a lot of good information. I don't know. I didn't know neither one of them. And this guy goes, you know, why won't you get on TV? Why don't you get a television program? You know, what are you afraid of? What are you afraid of? Why don't you get a TV program? And then he said this, and I was like, oh my God, that's exactly why people are having an issue. He goes, what's the matter? Don't you want to reach the world? And he was equating getting on TV and having, like you said, a bigger audience with reaching the world. You know, that ain't gonna happen.
That ain't reproducible either.
No, yeah, how's that gonna happen to the guy you're training?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, how many people you know in our lifetime that have the charismatic gifting of being able to stand in front of an audience that large and really command attention? Like, there's very few people that can do that. So
Right.
you cannot reproduce that model. There's
Yeah.
no way.
Right.
That's right.
Like, it's not doable.
Right. The assumptions are off the chart. All
Yeah,
right. And you know, I said this to you, Jason, last night, is, you know, if that's the way to get it done, if that's the way to really reach the world, then Jesus came at the wrong time. He did not come when when he was supposed to. That means he made a mistake, which
Well,
means
we would assume Billy Graham has a better strategy, but you can see from when he started to now, we really haven't seen. There may be more people saved, but we really hadn't seen a shift in culture that's really dramatic compared to the number of people who heard him speak.
yeah,
He's spoken in front of millions and millions of people. I mean, you think, you know, a couple hundred million people in 30 years, you'd make a big dent. And I'm not saying he didn't have an impact. Don't misunderstand me. But it's not to the degree that we think it will.
right.
Because it's not reproducing; it's stopping with the one who heard.
We
So
well we
generation is over.
we mentioned this in other conversations, is that when Jesus showed up, you know, why was it so key when he showed up? Is because there was disciples running everywhere. The making disciples, reproducing disciples. It was just so embedded in a culture, and we just don't have that. We don't have anything that looks like that, other than maybe the cults that, you know, the people, you know, the government runs in on.
Yeah.
Well, so Bill, Derek, you can speak to this too. So, what obligation do we have with the guys we're training to show that biblical culture. You know what I mean? It's like
Yeah.
pointed out in the text so they can have a framework to even get close to what this is really supposed to look like. We're never going to be able to do disciple making like Jesus did because you know you're not going to quit your job and move in with me and live with me 24/7
Right.
for the next 2 or 3 years. Like you just
Right.
can't. Culturally, we can't do that, but we can get close as we can.
Yeah.
But being able to see that, how much obligation are we to our guys to let them see that framework?
Right. I mean, we have,
It's a
like you
great
say, we have to model it. We have to show it constantly. Uh, I hear one of the lessons coming out in my head. You know, and the enemy, the person who understands that they stand in the position of Christ, the person who stands as a model to show how to transfer information into somebody to the point they can reproduce it in somebody else, and then they have a mark for the world. The enemy's more scared of you than any preacher standing in the pulpit
That's right.
in
Oh yeah,
TV.
yeah, for sure. Yeah,
And
for sure.
he'll come after me. He'll come after you hard.
Yeah,
We've seen
and when it
that.
starts ramping up, you'll notice it because the
One
amount of
thing,
spiritual attacks come. Oh gosh.
one thing I was thinking about when you asked that question too, Jason, is that text in Galatians 4:4 where it said that Jesus came at the appropriate
Exactly.
time. He it was, and then a lot of people will kind of mysticize that to miss, I think, the point to where, from what I've learned over the last couple of years with this kingdom thread, is it was like when Jesus entered in. Yes, disciple making was at its pinnacle. It was at its peak in that moment. He wasn't the only rabbi, which is great because a lot of people don't even understand that there were other rabbis. They just think there was the one. His name's Jesus. But
Yeah.
the culture he came into was fully functioning in a rabbinical movement.
Right.
But at the same time, there's what I would even see now that I hadn't seen before, that I try to convey in a lot of my teaching and disciple making, is while disciple making was up here and making a unbelievable impact in the Jewish traditions and culture, there was the pinnacle of meism,
Oh yeah.
of the
Yeah.
the Greek
Hellenistic
culture
culture. Yeah.
was
Yeah.
elevating itself to the Caesar, to the this culture of world. It's all about you, that Hellenistic movement.
Yep.
And so all of a sudden these leaders from the Greek culture now into the Roman culture, that is all squeezed into that couple hundred years. It's built to where it's all about me. It's all about me. And then the disciple making strategy is maybe a little off because of the Jews, of course, missing some of the elements of what the text was actually pointing to, which was Jesus. Jesus steps in at the pinnacle of disciple making and the pinnacle of it's all about me. And he
Mm.
comes in and literally runs a stealth
Yeah. Yeah.
ministry in the middle of all that, where he looks like he's a rabbi, and it actually looks like he gives a crap about the crowd, and he does. But he's more. It's just this. It's and that's what I see today. I think the same culture is prevalent today, but like we run under.
Hmm.
We're running under the, like, there ain't nobody listening to us. I mean, they are. There's the people that are is great, but we don't need a crowd to do what
Right.
God called us to do.
Right.
We
Yeah.
don't. That's one of the most freeing things for a institutional minded guy like me, is I don't need a crowd to change the world. I need one faithful guy to just sit down in a chair across me and listen, receive, and be prepared to reproduce what he's hearing and what he's seeing. And I think that's what Jesus was looking for. And I think he walked in again to the heights of discipleship and the height of what I call meism. It's all about me.
Oh, it's
And
moving.
he,
Yeah, moving God from the center of our universe to mankind to the center of the
right,
universe.
that's right.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
right.
And
Well,
those
And
two
Jesus
cultures
brings
are
that back.
parallel right there. Yeah.
you know who you
And
sound like more than Jesus though, Derek? When you say that,
uh uh
you don't sound like Jesus to me.
uh
You sound like God. You sound like the Father, because that was the Father's heart. I only
yeah,
need one guy.
that's it. Yeah.
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 It took me a long time to get my father's heart.
Yeah. But that is the Father's heart. He did not send 5 Jesuses and hope one made it.
Well, even throughout the scriptures, you can see him raising up a man like Moses, Abraham. Like you see David, you can see him. Hey, when God's met with a problem, he sent one man with his heart
Yeah.
Mm.
to turn back mankind from their obvious.
To change the course of history, to change the world, to change, and which is, from our perspective, um, if we're going to act like the Father, then we have to realize that we got to change. We're going to change the world. It's inevitable. That's why in Revelation we have every tribe, kindred, and tongue represented. That means we won. We win.
Yeah.
It's,
Amen.
it's just
And
it's
the
just a
evidence
matter of
is
time.
it's already going there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and that, what we said we were going to do at the beginning, Bill, which I think is hilarious because we still haven't got to the beginning, and we kind of started on the back end with what is a disciple,
Uh huh.
and then kind of the Great Commission, and it's like almost every single conversation we've had, and it's more evident today than ever. It's like this idea of vision is still hovering
Yeah.
Yeah.
right here in everything we do. Because what you just said, which I didn't think I was thinking like the Father, and I'm glad you pointed that out. But I would say the reason I'm thinking like the Father is because I've learned to see like the Father,
Yeah.
where that perception is key to moving forward. Is the like, okay, well, what's true vision? Well, true vision is getting on your heart what's on God's heart. What's on God's heart?
Yeah.
Marty knows the answer to that.
Yeah.
Like I ask him that all the time, and he knows the answer.
Yeah.
And he's people, people, every time. It's like the simple understanding, but it's a huge supernatural phenomenon that only the Spirit of God can help you see in a way that not perfect, because our minds are convoluted with us and so many other things, but we have that miracle of illumination that we have learned to see from the Father's point of view, not just what to do, but even what to do with us and what to do with other people. And
Right.
it's all throughout Scripture.
And these ideas, like we've said a couple of times, these ideas are overwhelming. They are they are smothering. They are stifling. It's like a huge somebody just poured a dump truck load of sand on top of you. You know, you're trying your best to dig out and get a
The
breath.
avalanche.
Yeah.
Here's
Yeah.
a spoon.
Yeah. But
What, Jason? What?
Yeah, it's like, yeah, here's a spoon. You're
Oh,
under
yeah.
2 tons of sand, and here's a spoon. Can I get something a little bigger? Yeah.
but if somebody is feeling that way, and if somebody's feeling that way, I'm not trying to put that on them. I'm not trying to kill you. I'm not trying to knock you down. I am, but I'm not. I want you to stop relying on your flesh. So that's part of that knocking down. But I also want to encourage people to say, hey, um, if you're thinking that this is so overwhelming and it's so smothering, that's perfectly normal. And I give you freedom to move in it, not move in it. Like if you want to sidestep this, what we're talking about, have at it.
Yeah. But I ain't in the business of trying to alleviate it either. I'm
No,
not going to come and try to take it off of you because I
no.
know what
Yeah.
it's going to do.
When
Because
it,
it's a good thing. It feels like crap in the moment, but over the course of a couple of years, it'll transform you probably better than anything else.
and I returned the favor that I got whenever I called Herb up and I went, it's killing me, it's killing me, I'm dying, I'm dying. He went, that's good. I mean, I was
Yeah,
just,
I think we had that conversation one time, and I was speaking on one in our group on a Wednesday night, I think it was, and I was just like so frustrated, and I'm like, "What is? I don't understand what God's doing." And Bill's just like, "It ain't none of your business." I'm just like, "Oh,
oh,
okay."
Yeah,
I
and
just let him. I just let him pummel me. Just crush my
yeah,
flesh.
man.
After that, was like, this ain't fun, but I mean, at least I know. Oh, okay, this is God doing that.
And when God's moving in that way, man, I mean, you have to, like, if somebody was feeling the weight of that and trying to sidestep, um, I mean, think about the incredible privilege and opportunity and confidence God has in you to even be revealing these things to you.
That's right.
I mean,
That's good. That's a good statement. Man.
what's residing in you that He would take the time to show it to you, and here you go, oh, that's too big for me. Apparently, He don't think so.
Yeah. So,
That's
so to build this thought just hit my brain, and maybe Derek and you can kind of talk about it. Like, what, when you take on that debt, you're willing to say yes to that debt
Yeah,
and start moving. How much of s- truth, like revelation of truth from the Word, understanding of how to present it and pass it on, how much of that starts to ramp up
oh
when
man,
you're willing to say yes to that?
yeah, exactly. I mean, then now you realize you're trying to build a house with a pair of pliers and a rubber hammer, you know, and you're like, oh boy, I need I need so much more. I need I need to get
yeah.
skilled. I need to get skilled with this like yesterday.
Right. Yeah.
And boy, then you know, a lot of people a lot of people are trying to figure out how to get passionate enough to read their Bible every day.
Yeah.
You know, I feel sorry for you. I mean, I really do. If you're struggling to read your Bible every day, or not necessarily, you know, be regimented in that, but I mean, if you, what really I'm talking about is hunger for the Word.
Yeah.
So, how do I get hunger for the Word? But if you take on this task, if you stand in the slot that Jesus stood in, and you understand that you're the Father's answer to a lost world, then, and you stand in that slot, man, it will drive you. Yeah,
Yeah.
it opens your ears, it opens your eyes, and you start seeing Scripture in a different way. Um,
Yeah.
Man, all of a sudden, you go, man, I didn't see that. I never saw that before. I never saw that before.
Yeah.
Well, and it's
I get,
like nothing's retained. Nothing is retained in us when the focus is on us,
Yeah,
and we fall into that demonic trap, selfish trap of it's, it's we're taking all this truth in and we're reading our Bible and it's just like nothing's getting filled, like we're still empty here. And then the moment somebody just comes in, like Dillingham used to do this all the time, I loved it, and I'll try to mimic it with this, but like he, so it was like he'd come in and sit down in the church years ago, and he would make the comment, and he'd say, "All I'm doing is just letting you see the other side that you couldn't see before. Just turning." Remember that Dillingham with the
I
like the
stole, I
prism
stole it
and the
from I stole it from RVL. Yeah.
yeah, and that idea is that um, of course, that's the idea that comes with the retaining, where we don't retain for us because when we start to read and gather the bread of life, the word, the truth, the Torah, the truth of God's word, and we start to give it away, that's when we remember. That's when we can recall these things. And it's like somebody's like, "What school did you go to?" I ain't never
Yeah.
been to any divinity school.
yeah,
And I have no desire to go to. Well,
right.
how do you know what you know? And I know the two of y'all have had that
Mhm.
asked of you.
Oh
And it's like it's good. It's almost a confidence builder, not in us, but in look what God do with a guy that didn't even learn how to study homiletics and how to study the Greek and how to study it's just somebody freaking determined to go give away what they've been given and go after the world. And
Yeah,
yeah.
that's how it's retained, and that's how it's the fruit comes alive in that, and we become the walking tree of life
mm.
for
Yeah.
other people.
Yeah. I had that conversation with a guy Wednesday night. at prayer meeting, and after service we went outside, and it was me and guy's been in process with me for a little while. He's not very far along in it, but he's been in it for a little bit, and God's starting to turn him. Like, you can see the eyes are getting opened, and he's been a Christian for 40 years, and he's just the last year or two really starting to understand what, you know. And every day he's like, man, I can't believe I hadn't seen this before. And so anyway, so we're talking, and he's like, people are asking me now, where are you getting this passion from? Where are you getting this passion from? And I looked at him, I said, do I feel like I'm trying to ramp up passion? Like, when you have a conversation with me about the text, it just starts to bubble. Like, it just starts to just, you know, like a volcano. Like I don't have to drum it up. And I said, that's years of just walking with the Lord, on truth, letting that truth just marinate in my heart. And when somebody pokes me, it's coming out. Like, you don't have to manufacture it. And so people talk about, man, where you getting this stuff from? Where'd you learn all this? And I'm just like, 20 years of just digging and giving away and digging and giving away, and you'll be shocked by how much you will be able to retain and pass on, if your purpose is to give it away to build somebody else.
That's it.
It's a relentless pursuit.
That's the only key. Yeah. People are like, well, you're such a great teacher. No, I wasn't a great teacher. I was an awful teacher. I was terrible. Bill can testify to it. I was awful. I said, but I've learned through this process over time how to pass away information, and God has honored that and just given me more. And so now I have a library in my heart and in my head that I can pass away or pass on.
And somebody mentions a passage of scripture, and I find myself doing this. Somebody will mention a passage of scripture, and my eyes light up, and I'm like, ooh, that's a good one, you know. And they're like, what do you mean it's a good one? Oh, that's a great passage, you know. And you start talking about it, and they're like, what, you know, something you said a minute ago about homiletics. I got that one time. I had got some cream to get rid of it.
It's like a rash. Like what you said, Bill. Like, I think I probably, I don't want to say this word. You'll understand what I mean. So if somebody listening doesn't make sense or it offends them, I'm sorry. But I've caught more men into this process by doing what you just said. Somebody coming and mentioning a verse, and I kind of like light up, and I'm like, and they're looking at me like, what? And I'm just like, well, what about this? Or what about this? And what about? And they're just looking at me like, what Bible are you reading? So, just that passion overflowing, just that, and it all stems around, I'm willing to take on the debt. I'm willing to say yes to it, even though it seems like an impossible task. I'm willing to do it in a way. I'm willing to pound that debt in the way Jesus told us to.
Yeah.
And God is going to back up the truck to give us the riches that we need to do to pay it.
Right.
That's it.
Yeah.
The skill set comes, but our talent is not the factor.
The Father is looking for. Okay, so He is the master investor, and He is looking for somewhere to put His resources to work. The parable of the talents, parable of the minas or pounds or whatever. He's looking for somebody that will take what He gives them and reproduce it in somebody else, right? To make more of them, make more of the same kind. You just like creation, you know. Go and make the same thing that I just made you, right? He said that to the plants. He said that to the animals. He said it to mankind, and now He's saying it to every believer. What I have placed in you, like some people say, well, I don't have that much. Really? What did He invest in you? What did He invest to get you? He invested Jesus the Christ. So He invested that in you. Guess what He expects out of you? Another one that looks, not just you looking like it, but another one that looks like it. So it's not about you no more. It is, but it ain't. You're just the vehicle.
And we're not necessarily giving the person their riches. They've already received the riches in Christ Jesus. We're just helping them to appropriate them and start to invest them. Like, you realize what you already have?
Yeah.
Let me show you.
We're just in their warehouse opening up their boxes.
Did you see this room? Did you see this room?
They say, wow, I opened this box and it had all this in it. I've been playing with it for 2 years. Really? You need to look over here at these boxes. These boxes.
Yeah. You find out you're in the closet of a mansion and realizing, oh, I got more rooms here.
Yeah.
You're in the pantry.
That goes
back to the living room yet.
Yeah.
We just, oh, you've never seen that? Yeah, that's what it says right there.
Yeah.
That's all for you. Yeah, like just that slightest turn of, and is that not a part of the authority
Hmm.
that that we get in the Great Commission and in Matthew 28 is the authority
Yep.
to disciple, teach,
Hmm.
Yep.
to the identification and I mean that just that's that that's I think for me, like looking back at years of institutional struggle with these truths, which I was going to ask the question: can you relay the debt on a Sunday morning?
Mm.
Oh, that's a great question. Can it be
Maybe
relayed?
introduce it.
Can
Can
it
it?
be
Can
relayed?
you? You can, because I've tried it, but
You
can it
can.
be relayed? And
Well, I'll tell you. I'll give you an example of what happened to me. So the church I'm at now, they really didn't have much missions going on. They really just didn't have. They weren't doing much outreach as far as like, overseas or anywhere really. And I'd been meeting with the pastor for a little while, and I said, "Hey, what's the chances of us getting a map in the sanctuary and putting it on the wall?" And he was like, "And just start praying for the nations." And he was like, "That's a good idea." So like a week went by, and they had one. They put it on the back wall, but at least it got in there. But it put it up there, and then during prayer meeting, we'd have times where we go pray for the nations, and it started to be just I mean, it was just a little subtle thing, but it started to focus. And now, within 8 months, now we've got 2 or 3 mission trips. Part of it's mine, but part of it's theirs too. Like they're starting to realize the need for that part of the
yeah,
their
that's good.
their ministry, which to me was like cool. It's a
Yeah,
subtle and slow thing, but that's in a crowd. Now imagine what you could do with a person.
Right.
yeah, yeah.
Now
Right.
that church has started to do it, but one of the guys I'm meeting with that's in that church has been on 3 mission trips within just over a year. He's been a, he's been to 3 different overseas trips, and
Wow.
the transformation in his life is dramatic.
Mm.
I remember years ago, I put the globe up in front of the congregation. This was probably, I started, I'm 18 years almost to the day, 18 full years. This was probably 17 years ago. My first year, I might even have still been um, the interim, which I wanted to stay as an interim. You could say a lot more and get away with a lot more as an interim. But I remember putting the globe out there, and it was on the communion table, and it stayed there for maybe a month or so, and then it didn't look right. So I can still remember uh, having to move it, and so I thought, well, that didn't work. What if I get one a little bigger? And so I ordered one of these huge maps and put it on a whiteboard and taped it to it. And then I got it and set it out there on an easel, and it would stay. And I think y'all's group was coming around some then, and I put it on the easel, and it was like, I don't. I mean, that the reason I asked is it might have been a lot to do with me
Yeah.
transferring that debt of the world, but it has a lot to do also with where you are. I
Yeah.
think, like who's around you and what environment you're in. And it sounds like, Jason, you've come to one of the best places you've been for God to use you in a long time in that kind of mass setting.
Yeah. And I wouldn't recommend it. I mean, I'm not saying
Yeah,
it's a an ideal situation. It's just where I found myself, and I really
yeah,
hadn't changed strategies. I show up where God tells me to show up, and I'm looking for the next guy.
Right.
yeah,
And can I infect a larger group of people in some ways? Maybe we'll see. We'll see. I don't know that it'll really be any different than anywhere else I've been, but we do have a few guys that have emerged from there, and I normally don't get 3 or 4. I usually just get one here and there. So we'll
yeah.
see. We'll see. Maybe I'm getting a little bit better at being patient and being a little bit more intentional.
Right.
Um, but again,
Oh,
it all comes down to what God's doing in somebody's heart.
But
So
saying it to a crowd is not worthless. It's just
right,
it just, if you think you're going to get somebody to see the debt through that, maybe, but you better be ready to say it about 1,000 times,
Yeah.
before somebody even recognizes you're saying something different. Um,
Yeah.
it's hard. It's not impossible. It's just not the way it usually happens.
Yeah.
Usually you got to lay a lot of track. Like for me to hear that the world was my responsibility took a year and a half of track being laid. Okay,
Yeah.
and that wasn't just me casually going to church. That was me going after information and
Yeah.
chewing, and really being passionate about this information. And I was thinking I was hearing it. I was thinking I was understanding it. I was thinking I was right on mark with it. And then God all of a sudden went, "No, lunkhead, bam," and then just graciously, kindly knocked my head off my shoulders.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
but it took a year and a half of listening to the information before I was even ready to hear it. So to think about saying this to a crowd and hoping they hear it, I mean, I'm not saying it can't happen. It's just
Yeah.
not my experience.
Yeah.
Well, my experience in that realm is and God's kind of given me these three words, and I'm very much a framework kind of guy. Like, give me a framework that I can work in. And so recently, the three words He's been telling me is engage with people wherever that's at. It could be at your work, it could be in your family, or it could be at a church. So you've got to engage people with truth, like with these ideas, somewhat. And when you engage these people, most of the people are going to just look at you and go, yeah, and they're going to move on. But occasionally, you'll emerge somebody. In other words, they'll lean in a little bit, or they'll ask to meet, or they'll have conversations with you. And so you got this transfer from engagement to emerging, and a person starts to come forward or lean in. And at that point, if they stick with you long enough, then you can begin to equip. So that's kind of my plan. So when I'm in a crowd, I'm just just slinging out seed and see who leans in, and
Yeah.
it takes months of engagement and conversation before you really even see anybody poke their head up.
And that's a
Because
skill.
we've trafficked in tradition so long at a church, it really takes a while for them to be able to even hear that you're saying something different.
Right.
What did they normally hear? So,
Oh, I'm 18 years, and I've had
yeah,
one,
yeah,
two, I've had
yeah,
three emergencies.
yeah,
18 years,
yeah,
and I've had three. Now, early on, I would say four, but one hadn't been here in 10 years. The other two, and then now the most recent that that has he's fallen in. He leaned in and then fell over the rail. Hallelujah.
yeah, yeah. Those are
Um,
good. I like those.
and that was a good thing. But again, my experience in the institution with this has not been too successful. There's success. There is fruit that has been transferred, given away, and then seeds. I've seen some reproduction, but it's a hard place to transfer this. It's a challenging
Mm.
Yeah,
place. If you put all your going back to what I think Sonny keeps hearing from me, I was like, man, if you put all your eggs in this basket, brother, you are going to be ultimately just constantly frustrated and upset because you can't put all your eggs in that basket. You can put some in there, but then if some of those people come out and keep walking with you beyond the walls of the institution, and man, keep
yeah, yeah,
keep slinging that and keep
yeah.
giving that away, and that's it's yeah I don't know, man. The debt is again, it's something that's caught, not taught,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
Heard that a many times. The vision is caught, not taught. And you I can explain what I feel. Bill, you can explain what you feel. Jason, you can explain what you feel with the weight, but until somebody ultimately feels that supernatural globe of millions and millions and millions of pounds crushing you down, there's not really going to be much intention to move.
Mm.
I mean, there will be, but the movement won't be God movement. I mean, it will be to a point, but that debt is what is the fuel for moving.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That,
I feel like a lot of people may move just because they see you move, but if that debt
yeah.
doesn't ever hit them, they'll eventually stop running.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah,
Yep.
that's
And that,
true.
um, I was just thinking about how I felt, how I feel, um, or how I felt when I first realized the debt. It was almost like that feeling you have when you go to school and you realize there's a book report due and you didn't even read the book.
Oh
Yeah,
gosh,
man, I felt like that. I felt like
that
that
happened
all
to me a lot.
That's panic. That's not urgency. That's panic.
That's
Yeah,
right.
you
And
get really good at winging it,
Yeah,
no, there
but
is
it
no.
doesn't turn out too well.
No, it's like you're trying to wing a book report on the guy that wrote the book, and
Yeah,
I think he's
yeah.
gonna know it. I think he's gonna
yeah,
know when you're.
I'm talking about my childhood scholarship.
Yeah,
You know,
he knows the BS level is at a all time high. Um,
yeah,
yeah, it's just like it's a urgency, it's a panic, but the one of the some of the benefits, and maybe we need to talk about the people like, wow, why would I ever want to take on that kind of debt? Um, but the benefits of that debt is I quit looking at people.
mm,
I quit looking at anybody else because it wasn't their responsibility.
mm,
It is, but it's not. So, somebody would say, "Hey, I want to invest all what God's given me in this, or to build a ministry or whatever." Not that ministry is bad. Ministry is not bad, but I'm going to invest everything I've got in that, and that's going to, that's where I'm going to put my money. And I go, okay, fine, put all your money over there. Just don't ask me for none of mine.
yeah, yeah.
yeah,
It's like buying blockbuster video stock.
yeah.
You can do it. I think there's one store left.
Yeah, you may want to rethink that there, Skippy. Um,
Well, well, one of the benefits and you guys agree with this, I know because I watched y'all. One of the benefits I found from following this model and carrying this debt is you begin to see the potential of every single person you
oh
meet.
yeah,
Like you can start to realize, like, wow, this person could be, you know, a world changer,
but it's
and
not their
and they're and they're
giftedness.
and they're, and they're nobody, yeah, and they're nobody in society. No, nobody thinks nothing about them, and so like they become like, ooh, man, this guy that everybody else is, relegated to nothing and has no potential value in society could change the world.
Mm.
Um,
Isn't it
and it,
amazing that the
it
most successful people that we have been around and impacted with the strategies of Christ and with the truths, I've seen it. And the ones that I would expect to get a hold of the vision, to take the vision and move it and to go after the world, they're the ones that get sucked into more of the implosion, to whereas the ones that like nobody gives a snowball chance in hell,
yeah,
like they're the ones that literally, and it's the same reason Jesus was led by the Father to choose those 12 men.
Mm.
And there's so many reasons he chose those 12 men, not just so he could prove that he could take a bunch of dropouts and screw ups, but that he could take this group of radically different individuals and literally not change their personalities, because God had given them their personalities and God had allowed them to have this background, but to take what they were in their humanness and let the Spirit of God come in with their humanness and their createdness and transform the world, man. And it's like I used to early on think everybody had to be just like me, and God would give me nobody like me. And it's like, why the heck ain't nobody around me that I'm pouring into and discipling like me? And then all of a sudden, the last two guys that God's given me, just like Derek.
Mm.
And it's like, why? And God said, because I couldn't trust you with them before, because y'all had taken over the world and probably killed hundreds of
Y'all
people
probably would have killed each other. Yeah.
and killed each other. And now it's like, oh, that makes sense, God. I had to be radically changed because I was a
Yeah.
little off with that. But that goes back and speaks to the point of that idea of who we're looking for. And that has so changed in me over the last, because I was looking for guys that could, yeah, let's go after the world, but can you help me in this thing?
Yeah.
God don't do that if you're a pastor. Do not do that. I do not advise that.
Mm.
Do not find somebody that can help you in your institution and also go after the world, because I can tell you which one's going to win.
Mm.
The world ain't going to win. It's going to be the institution. I know that from experience.
Wow.
And it sucks.
Because you're living in it every week. So it's getting before
And
you
it's
move
a,
off
it's
the
a
world.
succubus. It's like a freaking succubus. It's like it's a vortex. The institution sucks you into it. And the world is sitting there like, hey, I thought you were coming after me. I thought I'm the one that's not heard of Jesus. They hear about him every day. I'm the one that needs the goods. They hear about the goods all the time.
Yeah. We'll get to you when we get this thing worked out.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
So one of the things I used to do early on, and you guys could probably attest to this. You go for people that have some skills. You look at them as maybe they're gifted or whatever. And then I started to realize most of those people won't move in this because they've had some success
Yeah.
in the other,
Yeah.
and they're not willing to give that up to chase something that seems almost backwards.
Yeah.
You know what I
Or
mean?
slow.
So most of the time, the guys that God brings me are ones who have been minimized in that institution or in that
Right.
ministry growth. You know what I mean? Because when I find somebody who has some skill
Frustrated.
set and has got some success, they're not frustrated. They're like, hey, it's working for me. So, and then when I find somebody that's been chewed up and spit out, it's like you might be.
And that's what Bill, that was our conversation a couple conversations back, where we both told our stories of how the institution literally chewed us up and crapped us out.
Mm.
And in that moment of frustration is when somebody showed up,
Mm.
right?
Yeah.
Whether it was Herb or Jason White, somebody
Right.
showed up. And it was like, oh, I would have never seen this if I was kicking butt in the institution.
Oh yeah.
And maybe I couldn't say that, but the chances of me seeing that would have been largely minimized.
Right.
If I was not frustrated, if I was not wondering, there's got to be more than this, because this sucks. I don't even want to go into work every day. I don't even want to go in on Sundays. And this is, of course, prior to Catawba Baptist, but I feel that way even here a lot of times, and just that frustration. And I've learned to instead of wrestling with the frustration, I've learned that the frustration, if it's not there, something's wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So when the frustration builds, it's usually because God's moving me. It's usually because God's saying, I don't care if you stay or go, but you got to get your ass out of here, dummy.
Yeah.
That divine discontent.
Yeah.
Yeah, the divine discontentment, and that's I think that's again, not to come back to the institution, but so many people we come in contact with have been either hurt by it, burnt by it, or absolutely worshiping it and missing. At some point, that's the challenge.
Or they're putting so much effort into it, and they see so little return.
They're on the treadmill.
Yeah,
they're on the treadmill.
and they're tired. They're frustrated. They're they my wife would say at one point, "Boy, I'm glad you don't play an instrument, because they would that's one more thing you'd have to do."
Yeah.
Because they just and you get used up because there's so few people actually doing the work. That's the big complaint. And again, I'm not telling you to stop going to church. Uh, I'm kind of like, if somebody says I don't want to go to church, I'll be like, well, I'd stop. You know, um,
Yeah.
Yeah.
but the only way that God's going to get maximum glory is to take people that shouldn't be successful, that that are failures, that are um, you know are people that don't have a lot of knowledge, that don't have
Yeah. I'm like,
yeah
You're like, yeah, I'm in that group. Yeah.
yeah. I
and
mean,
but how
Well,
many people
discounted.
would think that about you or me or you, Bill? Like right now,
yeah,
most people would be like, "What do you mean? You guys talk with great passion and great knowledge, and the words on your like. What do you mean? You're one of those?"
yeah,
Well, again, you're seeing 20 years
yeah,
of time spent being invested into,
yeah,
hallelujah,
yeah,
and also investing
yeah,
into others.
right,
And before that, like I'm still a train wreck,
mm,
but thank God I don't stay derailed near as long.
mm,
Yeah.
God
yeah,
puts my butt back up on the track a lot quicker than what it used to be.
right. Well,
Well, I don't know if maybe in my mind, being discounted in the world, it may not be accurate from the outside, but it's the way I felt
mm,
That's
on
right.
the inside. Does that make
Which is
sense?
humility. That's
Yeah.
humility.
Well, I feel like in areas of, either it's during school or in business or in social status, like I felt like I was always a little
Yeah.
less than. You know what I mean? And I would try to like, and it just
Yeah, we talked about
never,
that the other day.
no matter where I was at, like I was always kind of felt like I was
Yeah.
second place or third place or whatever. And I don't know if I'm sure it's God's doing because it gives me that discontentment. But in that process, in that feeling, outside of spiritual things, it drove my flesh. It drove me to try to want to be better and do more, and it gave me this kind of ambition. And I remember early on in my walk with the Lord when I came to Christ, it was like, I don't know if this ambition is healthy. You
Mm.
know what I mean? I don't know if it's, so I had to wrestle with the Lord about whether it was spiritual, spiritually, is it good to have this kind of ambition? Because that was like, every time I would try to drive it, it was a train wreck, but God would never take it away from me. He would never let me,
right,
like in business, He would never let me stop
mm-hmm,
feeling that draw. And now, here we are years later, and I do own a business, but it doesn't drive me.
right,
It gives me opportunity to do this, which is crazy. Like you would have never thought that like
right,
15, 20 years ago.
right.
Yeah.
I'm not a believer that I'm not a believer that uh, being a believer wasn't the main drive. Being an employee was the main drive, right?
Mm,
That's what centered you. That's what gave you your identity and everything else. That's where you
right.
saw your success. That's where you got all your gratification, all that.
Yep.
And the shift is now I get all my gratification, identity, and everything in being a believer, and I just happen to have this job over here.
Yeah. It becomes a tool to help this thing,
Yeah,
not the
Yeah.
other way around.
it becomes support to that versus, being a believer makes me a better employee
Right. Right.
or
And
better.
and what's crazy is as you walk in this process, you become better at all those things because this does
Yeah,
um, advance your skill sets, and you care about people, and you have just better attention to time and detail and discipline and commitment. Like all that stuff rises up much
yeah,
higher.
it's crazy.
Everybody
One,
hears you. Yeah.
one thing I'll say this, and I got to roll. Last couple of weeks I've said this. I was telling Jason about it. I might have told you too, Bill, but I've said some things out of the pulpit I haven't said in 18 years, and I was thinking about it because it's a glimmer of hope, and it's also a testimony to maybe what the Lord's done in me and changed in me as a pastor. But I've said it the last 2 and it made an impact on Kevin so much that he came up to me a couple weeks ago and said, "Well, this is what impacted me." And I'm like, I wasn't even planning on saying that. It just came out. And what impacted him was the same thing I repeated last week, which is it's a good day when the pastor doesn't have to shake the crowd down to minister.
Mm.
Mm.
And for the first time since I've been here, it's like I'm having to get on the phone and call people or text people and be like, "Hey, they're just boom." It's like I I haven't been able to manipulate that in the past, and now all of a sudden, after a certain amount of time, there is still it's a small 80-20 thing. I mean, it's like that a lot of places, but I don't that might even be more 30-70, which is phenomenal. But there is I'm actually boasting a little bit about the institution that there are in that crowd, there is in that crowd of people that Jesus is ministering to, a transfer of somebody else does matter today. Let me go take care of somebody else. And
Yeah.
man, that's a great kingdom aspect. And I
That's not
would
a small. That's not a small thing either. Yeah,
no,
that
that's
shift. That
huge.
shift is a big, big thing.
And now, are there people that's leaning in and ready for me to take them overseas and ready for me to pour into them? I don't know. There might be more than there was 2 years ago, but I am seeing, a little bit of work that God's been doing. And it's like, man, that's awesome. I'm learning, and then maybe just that slightest change of heart would lean more people in and say, well, there's got to be more. There's got to be
Yeah.
more than just going to the needy and to the poor and to the broken and to the despondent people, right? Like there's got to be more. Yeah, there is more. Let's be intentional and let's pour into them. And so yeah, I don't. I mean, I end with that. I end what I'm saying with that. That's my, and nobody's probably listening this far into it, but maybe the person that's wondering why we're always cracking on the institution, maybe they heard that, because I mean that's a beautiful thing.
Now, and I don't think it's so much that uh, we're cracking on the institution. We're just trying to honestly evaluate
Yeah,
where to put efforts. And when you look at where to put efforts, I'm sorry, the institution is just a hole that you just throw massive amounts of resources down
yeah,
that does not reproduce what it's supposed to. Now, can
that's
it
right.
emerge people? Sure, but
Movie comes to mind? Money Pit.
Money
yeah,
pit.
yeah.
Tom Hanks.
That's Tom Hanks, man. I
Somebody
can't
sold that guy
remember.
really good. Yeah.
standing over the hole in the floor where the bathtub used to be.
I was laughing. That's so
Just
funny.
laughing. Yeah, but and it looks like a war zone. They tested missiles, at that house, and but that's what we've got. We've got a drafty house that we try to make ourselves believe is okay, and it ain't. So, but
Now, if we can look at people as that house and
oh man,
recognize it's
Yeah,
gonna look like
it,
that for a while, but at the end, this thing is gonna be whole and it's gonna be amazing
and one of
if
the
we can look at
greatest.
people that way.
It's funny that you bring up that movie because one of the greatest lines out of that whole movie about what we're talking about is this. They said, the guy said, I didn't think we was gonna be able to pull this one out, but the foundation was good. And if the foundation's good, everything else can be fixed.
Yeah,
That's one of the greatest lines because in this process, as long as the foundation is Christ, as long as the foundation is the Father, foundation is
that's
the
good.
then everything else can be fixed.
That's
yeah.
right.
And we're
Maybe
not gonna argue about paint color or carpet color.
Yeah,
or
Who
how long it
cares?
takes. How long is it
Yeah,
going to take? 2 weeks. Uh,
takes as long as it takes. Yeah.
takes as long as yeah, exactly. All right, gentlemen.
that's good, man.
Well,
Good
thank you.
stuff. Thank
I'll
Bless
y'all.
you guys.
see you.
Yeah, bless you.